Pokemon would be nothing without its characters. At the core of these games and stories, the characters, whether it's the Pokemon themselves or the people living beside them, have always acted as one of its main driving forces. And there's this particular charm in interacting with them, whether it's the Pokemon on your team that are aiding you on your adventure, or the variety of interesting people you meet along the way. Now, the Pokemon themselves are wonderful, of course, they're awesome. Often very cute and lovely little designs, but I can't interact with them the way I can with the people littered around the world of these games. Like, this is cute, and it has an incredible design, and it might even be perfect, but I'm not getting a ton from Pika Pika, unfortunately. Usually it's those other people in the world, the heroes, the villains, the other main characters where we're primarily getting that type of interaction. Getting to chat and adventure with these types can be some of the best parts of any game. But naturally, with such special characters, there's bound to be some that are, well, not so special. I'm sorry, son, you weren't born with a unique sprite. Don't think you're gonna be able to become a gym leader. For every one of these unique main characters with their moving and compelling dialogues and designs, it feels like there's hundreds of stock background characters with strange or mundane one-liners that fill out the leftover corners of this universe. They'll give you tooltips, other times it's strategy, sometimes it's just what's going on with them and their day. And I love it. It's certainly simple, but there's something I appreciate so deeply about a world where I can just walk up to a guy and he starts gushing about his favorite legwear at the mere press of a button. The mundanity and occasional strangeness you'll encounter in this world by talking to other people is beautiful in a way. It carries the sometimes nonsensical whimsy held in the daydreaming that we do as kids. The curious beauty of the everyday life is captured by these random, walk-cycling NPCs. And so today I want to highlight some of my favorite people in this universe that don't really have one of those major identities, or sometimes even a name at all, that still really left an impression on me. I want to give credit to those one-off characters that can make you say, what in the world is going on here? The emotion and curiosity that's invoked by just a quick word with a passerby. And as you can probably tell by the title, I want to focus today's lens on characters in the games that came out for the Gameboy Advance. I think it would be missing the point in a way for this to be outrageously long or generalized, going all throughout the history of the series, and I think there's a good middle ground in looking at something like this from one console log of games. And you know, the GBA is what I grew up on and my usual strong suit, so I thought let's do it. Let's take a journey through space and time and take a look back at some of the strange and beautiful NPCs of GBA era Pokemon. There was a certain thrill to me as a kid playing FireRed and LeafGreen and talking to everyone I came across in game. Mainly because I didn't know the game super well yet and I thought, maybe they'll give me a free item. But also because I was still at the age where I wasn't mashing the A button in a rush to get through everything, and I would still really ponder all the text that was displayed on screen. These games were my first experience with a series that would go on to be my all-time favorite, so it's going to be the first stop on our trip. These are my training grounds in a lot of ways. I was so relentlessly curious about this world and how everything worked inside it. As a player, I wasn't explicitly in the camp of just using attacking moves and trying to hit as hard as possible with everything. I thought I was an evil mastermind for doing things like spreading paralysis with Thunder Wave. But I wasn't quite there yet with the strategy of any of the really high concept stuff. Like, I didn't understand why anyone would ever use moves like Protect or Baton Pass. Famously bad moves. It all went way over my head. But I still experimented with them because I figured that there was still something to it even if I didn't get it yet. And for that reason, I was deeply concerned with knowing the rules of the games. I think that's why this girl on Route 3 is an extremely vivid memory from my childhood gaming in LeafGreen. There's practically an art to sneaking past trainers in Pokemon, because as the rule famously goes, if you lock eyes with a trainer, it's your responsibility to fight. And yet here I am on Route 3, walking north to avert my eyes and avoid this girl, only to get yelled at from across the grass and for her to say, "Excuse me, you looked at me, didn't you?" A look of horror descended upon my young face. I most certainly did not. You looked at me. But yet the battle cutscene rolls anyway, and no sooner had I knocked out her Pidgeys, she's telling me that I'm mean. I'm the mean one here, somehow. And she keeps going hard. After the battle, she says I shouldn't be staring if I don't want to fight. Yeah, that's right. Exactly, random stranger. That's why I wasn't looking. I didn't want to battle you. And so yeah, of course I learned a valuable lesson on that day about how this game works, but you can trust that I've still got beef. This is just the one in particular that I remember, but there are so many characters that this girl is an incredibly obnoxious emblem of. You have so many weird little interactions with the characters of this world that are more akin to you being accosted by a street vendor rather than really meeting someone. And I think it can really color the relationship that we have with the people of this world. It works to make the routes feel more adversarial, and the cities more welcoming and safe by contrast. These routes on the east side of Fuchsia City barely have any tall grass in them, but it still feels like Metal Gear the way I'm trying to sneak around this army of trainers. I'd describe it as the most stressful area maybe in any Pokemon game, and it's because of this way that you encounter most trainers. And at its core, I definitely think mandatory roadblock type battles are a good thing for these games, but the absurdity of this girl's dialogue kind of pulls my head out of the water for a second, and it makes me appreciate how strange all of this would be if I thought about it in real world terms. I love this girl and her Slowbro trying to do some training in Cerulean City. Usually I don't get a ton from the overworld Pokemon, but these two actually paint a really amusing picture because it's so much more dynamic than usual. She's trying to get Slowbro to use all these moves, and whether it's because she doesn't have the badges or it's just classic Slowbro, it simply has no idea what's going on. And it's just a really cute scene. I love Pokemon like this, behaving like this. It's extremely endearing. The weird thing that catches my eye here though is that she's telling Slowbro to use Sonic Boom, a move that it can't even learn and is also kind of bad, and then to just throw a generic punch, which I guess makes sense. Hopefully it's Ice Punch. That's the best one. And these two actually have a really subtle mechanical purpose as well, as they temporarily block this cut tree that could be used in Gen 1 to skip part of the story. If you were traded a Pokemon with Cut, you wouldn't have to visit Bill on the routes to the north and can move directly into the next area of the game by cutting down this tree. And so now we've got this trainer trying to get a Pokemon to use moves before they're ready, blocking the path until you're ready to use the move. It's like a really gentle chastising for those people who are skipping forwards a little bit, and you might not even realize what's going on unless you were aiming for it. Now while you won't find any Slowbro behind it, there's another pretty great NPC interaction behind the cut tree at the museum in Pewter City. This door takes you behind the front desk, and you're able to talk to the guy who greets you in the museum, a couple of guys at computers, and then this scientist who's standing next to this lovely, golden, almost shining artifact. What is this beautiful, otherworldly object? Well, let's find out and talk to the guy standing next to it. This scientist is convinced that there's Pokemon DNA in this piece of delicious looking amber, and he wants you to take it to the Pokemon lab on Cinnabar to prove him right. But you absolutely need to keep it top secret because his colleagues think his idea is totally ridiculous, and they can't know that you're walking off with what I'm assuming is museum property. I think sometimes Pokemon can go to pretty extreme narrative lengths to get unusual and magical things into the player's hands, so I really like this scientist's reasoning as why he's handing over the amber. He's clearly feeling desperate, so he'd probably slide this artifact to anyone willing to take a trip out to the Pokemon lab. If there's no DNA in there, no harm, no foul. You'll just bring it back and nobody has to know. But if there is a Pokemon in there, he's a genius. He would be a legend in his field. And he's not a trainer. He doesn't want whatever's in there. He just wants to prove that he's right, like a real scientist. Everybody wins. It's such an earnest plea. It makes me feel like I'm not just getting an item and eventually the Pokemon, but I'm also helping this noble archaeologist stick it to his haters. So that secret is 100% safe with me. Alright, but let's talk to everyone else before heading to the lab. What does this guy have to say? Oh no. Listen, I'm back here for completely normal and safe reasons. Just don't look at my amber-shaped pocket, please. Okay, now wait a minute. What even is that? I'm just a kid. I'm just a kid. I'm not harboring any stolen artifacts. That would be ridiculous, I think. Alright, yeah, it's cool. Now, fortunately, this guy just has a few fun facts about amber, but it is just awesome. He yes or no questions you if you know what amber is immediately after being told to keep a piece of it as a secret. It's like a line from Columbo or something. You know, just one more thing. And then over here, we've got a scientist getting downright philosophical. The secrets of space. The mysteries of Earth. There are so many things about which we know so little. But that should spur us to study harder, not toss in the towel. The only thing you should toss? Well, how about seismic toss? Should I teach that to a Pokemon? We get all that philosophy just to be a lead-in for a move. Move tutors like this are spread all over FireRed, LeafGreen, and Emerald, and as corny as they often are, getting more unique moves like this is super welcome, even if they are just a one-time thing. I always got a bit more attached to the Pokemon I put them on. I had a Hitmonchan growing up I decided to put Metronome on, and that was awful. But I thought it was the coolest thing, and I had a special relationship with that little guy. Some of these tutors are pretty strange though, like this guy in Fuchsia City leads off by telling you he wishes he was a Kangaskhan baby, and that he could hang out in the pouch as a substitute, the movie's gonna teach. And I'm not saying that that's bad or evil or malicious or anything, but it just strikes me as a pretty weird thing to tell a stranger and then start going into detail about. Fuchsia is host to plenty of odd one-offers like this. Over by the Slowpoke enclosure, there's this guy Eric looking for his friend Sarah, saying they meet up here. It's pretty unique to have a random townsfolk like this be named in his dialogue. Usually you'd only get that from the battle screen, or they'd have to be a pretty relevant story character for that to happen. Like the fishing guru in the house south of him doesn't even have that, so it kind of implies that there's more than meets the eye here. And the Sarah in question can be found in the Safari Zone, also looking for Eric. So it really seems like there should be something to do here, like a way to reunite them. But oddly enough, there's nothing more to be done here. This is the full extent of the characters' interactivity. Now, I've never heard a playground rumor about these two. It is only just stuff online or in forums while I was poking around at other stuff. But I'd still say this is teetering in the territory of Mew under the truck type phenomenon with how specific it all is. The premise really makes you think that there's something to be done. Now apparently in the original Japanese, these two are named after Game Freak devs, and the reason they can't find each other is because of some wordplay that is totally lost in the English translation. So originally it was just a fun little gag between developers. There's almost an art form that's demonstrated through Pokemon with things like this in the subtlety that's required for an RPG. You want there to be strong enough guide rails to guide players to objectives and secrets, like showing the cracks on a wall in Zelda to let you know you're supposed to throw a bomb at it. But you also want the world to be filled with enough mundanity and day-to-day interest that it all feels lived in and compelling as a world. And I think for the most part, Pokemon handles that balance really well. But the edge cases like this one are always so fascinating because their meaning usually ends up revolving around the player's assumptions instead of the actual text, since everyone just assumes something has to come of this. And it can end up being the spawn point for a kind of gaming folklore, if you will. I also want to bring attention to where you actually find Sarah. She's looking for Eric inside one of those safe houses in the Safari Zone, and these are maybe the closest thing I have to a liminal space in Pokemon. They feel extremely transitional, and there's virtually no reason to ever be inside them with how this iteration of the Safari Zone works. In lieu of a timer, you get 600 steps to move around in the grass and see the rare Pokemon living here, so every step you take counts. Something like a rest house for a safari makes sense in-world, but in this video game context, visiting one would be an explicit waste of steps unless there was some sort of reward inside, and there isn't really one to be found in all 4 houses. Just people resting and talking about their day. None of them say anything particularly interesting either, mostly just that they're resting and or tired. I do like this one guy who's really happy that he caught a Chansey. It sounds like he lives a pretty satisfying life. But being here and talking to these people gives me the same feeling that I would get as a kid using the walk through walls cheat in Diamond and Pearl to find little things of interest beyond the usual boundaries of the game. Like if you cheat to get behind the Pal Park building on Route 221, you find this distinct little grassy area with a good amount of detail put into it. There's some tall grass, a little ledge to jump over, and then a few rocks in a little sandbox shape. It begs the question of the wall walker. Why is this here? If I behave as I'm supposed to, I should never be able to see this. And yet here it is. Looking for places like this was one of my favorite things to do with the action replay I was given in the 5th grade. And yet with these rest houses, it feels like I've got one all the more unusual because these NPCs are reachable through totally normal means. There's no reason for me to go here, but yet here the people are. Definitely go and chat them up if you've ever got the spare steps. I bet these people are pretty lonely out here. Now I've saved what I consider the best for last in the Gen 3 Kanto section of this voyage. The last set of characters I want to talk about are the NPCs that live in the remake exclusive area of the Sevii Islands. This is without a doubt my favorite area in all of Pokemon. The Sevii Islands are such a special and personal area to me. I've wanted to talk about it for a really long time, but I've struggled with how I would want to frame the place and my relationship with it. And I think that's why this is finally the perfect time to talk about it, because the spirit and core of the Sevii Islands is captured so well in its characters. The Sevii Islands are a post-game addition to Kanto exclusive to FireRed and LeafGreen that have the trainer adventure through an archipelago of 7 islands, each with the simple name of their number followed by island. It's very descriptive here. There's technically 2 more of them also, but they're tiny and event only, so I guess they're not really in play with the naming scheme. It's a very different environment here from mainland Kanto. It's quiet and isolating in a way. The areas aren't as packed and focused, and it goes to feel a lot less guided because of it. There's an almost stoic feel to the adventure that you have here. It's not totally empty, there's still plenty of people doing their business, but they seem for the most part to live much lonelier lives than the people in mainland Kanto. And it's not lonely in a way that's explicitly sad, it's just descriptive. It's lonely here. I grew up in an area that was very similar to the way that this subregion made me and continues to make me feel. A small town, relatively underdeveloped, enough people for it not to feel like the middle of nowhere, but still very lonely. It was close enough to a big city to be able to take a day trip there and for people to come and go, but not close enough for it to really have an effect on you. The rugged landscape of the Sevii Islands really speaks to this particular level of development and the relationship that it has with Kanto. But I find that the spirit is best captured in the actual people living there. The islanders are mostly aware of Kanto, but it seems to have little to no bearing on their daily lives. The NPCs share with you simple but meaningful tidbits about the way they live their day to day. This guy has a daily routine of gazing at the grandeur of the volcano. This woman is gonna go fishing today. And this guy is excited about the bowl of chowder he's gonna have after his swim. Sounds delicious, dude. These people make it feel so beautiful here, that there's joy in the everyday because there's not a ton to do. I've always loved this girl on one island. She's in a house by herself and simply tells the player that even though young people want to go off to the big city, she wants to stay here forever. I'm right there with you, kid. These 2 guys are just messing around in their house on 3 Island, talking about the gym leader Sabrina and trying to see if they have any magic powers. It sounds like a classic activity on a nothing to do day. It's like I'm just walking in on a snapshot of island life. I think I personally get the most from the people hanging around on 5 Island. This kid's big plan for the day was to go play in the meadow, but there's some weird building there now and he can't really play anymore. This fisherman's trying to catch dinner for him and his wife, but as things have been getting busier, he's been catching less fish. Such similar moments stick out to me from my childhood. You grow up a little bit that day your favorite playground is refurbished from a hideaway into an eyesore. The story that plays out on these islands is a direct build-up to the Team Rocket story that happens in the Johto games 3 years later. And just over the quick time frame this prologue unfolds, you see drastic changes for the people of the island. The shops get better connected with more wares to sell. Celio gets the area connected to the networks in Kanto and Hoenn, and Team Rocket enters and leaves the picture. So sometimes I wonder how these people are doing, if they still have their quiet island life, and if I'll ever see them again. That's everything out of my system on FireRed and LeafGreen. This was my first game in the series, and it had left such a deep and incredible impact on me. Not just in the way that I thought it was fun to play, but also the type of world that I could witness through this game as a vehicle. So naturally, when I had the chance to, I asked my parents to get me one of the other ones, and soon I was heading out for a journey in Pokemon Emerald. It was a match made in heaven. And it's still a blast talking to everyone in this trio of games too. Obviously Ruby and Sapphire were the first to come out of all 5 of them, but the games altogether feel extremely consistent in terms of identity and world building. So the fun continues with our weird little guys in Hoenn. It's always been so impressive to me how subtly functional so many things are in Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald. There's so many extra people and things you really don't have to engage with, or really even perform that important of a function, but are still incredibly intricate underneath that surface. And there isn't a better example of this intricate nonsense than this ridiculous guy hanging out in the Mauville City Pokemon Center. Yeah, go ahead, man. Sing your little song to me. Oh, it's so good. Pokemon voice acting truly peaked in Gen 3. You can even change the lyrics using the Easy Chat feature. Ooh, I'm gonna make it say do the spoink dance. That's gonna send a message to the people of the world. But hold on for a minute. I'm sure some of you remember this guy and he did not have a song at all. And he was a different color and did something else weird instead. And we're all remembering correctly. This one weird guy is actually 5 weird guys all in one. You can only have one at a time, and the one you start out with is based on the last digit of your trainer ID. There's the bard, who will sing you his lovely song. Then you've got the hipster, who can teach you some new phrases. The trader trades secret base decorations with you when he isn't playing Among Us. You've got the storyteller, who naturally tells a story. And then finally Giddy, who just asks you some questions. You're not necessarily stuck with your respective guy once you've got yours loaded in either. You can trade out your guy with your friend's guys using the record mixing feature, which lets you trade profile information with other players that can go on to affect each player's save file. As a kid, I had the song guy. I didn't really think anything of it, but I was struck by the screeching he would make when he sings the little song, and it was memorable enough for it to be the first thing I wrote in my notes when I started on this project. These guys just feel like classic Gen 3. Classic Pokemon nonsense even. Something that you thought as a kid was funny or trivial or interesting, but you later learn it's just randomly filled with complexity and an underlying design process that wasn't really imparted to you at all. It's the needless, unexplained depth I just love exploring in these games. These guys are definitely one for the books. Mauville City seems to be a hotspot for cool characters like this though. If you stop doing the spoink dance long enough to head outside, you can head to the bike shop next door. And this place rules! Rydell gives you a free bike! This guy is the best, a friend of Pokemon trainers everywhere. Not like those con artists over at the bike shop in Kanto selling a bike for more money than your wallet can hold. They will be featured extensively in my follow-up video covering the worst NPCs. Not like Rydell though. He's clearly a great guy. But for me, it's not just that he gives you a free bike, it's that he has 2 and is willing to give you both, but only one at a time. That's where he draws the line on free bikes. Either the Mach bike, which is fast enough to let you climb up slopes, or the Acro bike, which allows you to bunny hop and access jump-only areas. It's understandable from a gameplay perspective though, because the 2 different bikes are used as parts of numerous puzzles and accessing certain areas of the game. And by only having one at a time in areas that can use both to find secrets, you end up exploring more and coming back to old areas and finding new stuff. It's honestly a pretty cool decision. But the in-world explanation for this is just awesome. It's not like you're not using both bikes. If you take advantage of the feature, it's like you effectively have 2. But he's just not quite at the level of trust with you to give out both at the same time. Maybe you don't have enough space in your backpack or something. This is also something that actually gets addressed in the remakes though, as after you've completed the game and done a bit of advertising for him, he gives you the second bike. It's a really sweet inclusion in those games. Alright, now I kinda wanna explore a little bit. Let's see who else they've got around here. Have I been checking out TVs? I'd have to say my favorite shows are Frasier and One Piece. Classics. Next question. Okay, now this guy is an all-timer. I love the idea of an NPC that knows he's an NPC, and he's loving life while doing so. They call him the Rock Smash guy, and that makes a lot of sense, because he hands out the HM for Rock Smash. But Guy is a little derivative, maybe a little disrespectful, so he's hoping that you'll call him the Rock Smash dude instead. And you know, I could get down with a Rock Smash dude. At least a whole lot more than a Rock Smash guy. But either way, he's loving life. This guy loves handing out Rock Smash, and he knows it. It's a little bit meta, but he's got a mission, and I gotta respect it. Now if we go a ways south from town and get closer to Slateport, you'll find one of Pokemon's strangest and most mysterious dungeons. Here you'll find a challenging shrine to illusion and trickery. Prepare yourself for the incredible Trick House. And it's another absolute all-timer. I love this place. It might be my favorite dungeon in all of Pokemon. The concept is just awesome. This place is run by the Trick Master, this super eccentric, self-interested lover of puzzles and mystery who has just built his own dungeon in between two major cities. What sort of zoning laws does this area have where a guy can just build his own super dungeon in the middle of a highway? And I say super dungeon because it's really 8 in 1. The Trick House has 8 different sub-dungeons that you unlock as you get the game's badges, and each one has been built as a test from the Trick Master to challenge your knowledge and cunning. And it's all such a fun and welcome non sequitur in this world, and it could easily be the subject of its own video, but the man by himself is still pretty cool. I think this area would be a lot less memorable without the Master. He just oozes character and it extends to the entire experience. He always starts the challenges off by hiding somewhere obvious in the main room, and then rages after you easily find him. What a little jokester. He proudly and frequently proclaims to be the master of tricks and challenges, and thinks everyone visiting him is here to test that. He works tirelessly, day and night, to concoct his mini-dungeons to test the player. The first challenge area is a maze of cut trees, and when you beat it, he complains that it took him all night to get those planted. That line really got me the first time I read it, because I hated cut trees as a kid, and suddenly someone in-game tells me he's putting them in front of me on purpose. It almost feels like commentary on video game puzzles in general in here. Like, who or what in these worlds is putting the obstacles in the dungeon sometimes? Because I think that in an effort to put a challenge in front of the player, video game obstacles can reach a point of contriveness where they instead are unimmersive and just feel like a roadblock rather than an engagement with the world. And it makes this guy and the area really work, because these are ridiculous, sometimes obnoxious mini dungeons, but the Trick Master is always there to tell you that he had all those boulders hauled in overnight. Also that he could hopefully take advantage of your aversion to HM moves. It's brilliant. This dungeon, purely for dungeon's sake, works in a way that they sometimes don't because it's not taking itself too seriously. And the centerpiece of it all is the Trick Master. He creates such an unusual and fascinating scene. I love everything about him and the tricks he resides over. We're getting pretty close to the end of our wayward exploration. There's really only one more group of characters I want to look at in the Hoenn games. Let's surf down to the quiet, floating village of Pacifidlog Town in Hoenn's South Sea. As a place totally composed of huts and log platforms floating on top of Corsola, it's a perfect image for the region with too much water. A town that's entirely based around it. It's plenty noteworthy just on paper, a totally aquatic town, technically optional in a playthrough, but I always find myself most captivated by the people living here whenever I make the trek. It's always fun to hear about the legends of the Pokemon world from characters inside it, and these two in the top right house give you some of the only salient dialogue about the Reggie trio in the game, sharing with you distant and vague stories about them that they heard from their grandparents. Other people in town are pondering and discussing the existence of Rayquaza. These two older guys are concerned with the legend of Mirage Island, one of them being able to check if it's spawned in. As a result of all this, the vibe here feels actually legendary. These are people on the pulse of the deeper, lesser-known folklore of the region, and you're getting some really special information just by being here with them. And then on the other hand, this town also has some incredible weirdos in it too, like this kid who is trying way too hard to sell you on this horsey he caught and trade him a bag on for it. Now, I'm not an expert in economics or anything, but I think it may be possible giving him one of the rarest and strongest Pokemon in the game for a random seahorse isn't a great deal. Sorry kid, better luck next time. And I don't even know what to think about the guy in this house. This old man is handing out TMs and will give you the TM for return if the first Pokemon in your party has high friendship, but can also give you the TM for frustration if the Pokemon has low friendship. That makes enough sense. Return does more damage with high friendship, and frustration does more damage with low friendship, both valuable tools depending on your situation. But as far as I understand it, In-world at least, having low friendship with a Pokemon is a bad thing. They are unhappy and do not want to be with you. Good people are not doing a lot of damage with frustration. And this freak has one Azurill that loves him, indicative of high friendship, and another one that hates him. What sort of messed up relationship does this guy have with Pokemon where he's got the favorite and least favorite out at the same time interacting with each other? This is awful to think about. Poor Azurill. The dialogue box does just say that Azurill doesn't like the trainer very much, so he's probably not evil or anything, but I'm still not thrilled. Treat your pets better, you weirdo. And then there's this kid who wants to know where you're from but only accepts yes or no answers. I am from Yes Town, actually. Who's asking? But suffice to say, there's a great range of characters in this town. It's a vibrant little boathouse community. Some people are handing legends down through the generations, some people are mistreating their mice, and then some are just dreaming about life and the world around them. Kinda like the Sevii Islands, I think it really benefits from being an endgame optional location, so they don't have to pepper the dialogue with hints and tips about what to do next. There's space for that type of character where if they have any purpose at all, it's just to paint a more vibrant picture of this world. And with that, we've reached the end of our strange little journey. That's all the NPCs that I have been sitting on, but there's so many good ones out there, and plenty of favorites I didn't get to. This was not a comprehensive thing by any means. And not to mention, there's plenty of other games too. I really only covered 2 worlds here, if you can believe it, and there are so many others to deeply appreciate and bask in. I always find that there's so much beauty and wonder in Pokemon when I really go looking for it. Stopping to take in the sights, pondering the people I meet along the way. I am surrounded by beauty when I allow myself to slow down like this, and really take in the everyday when it comes to these games. And hopefully, I was able to share some of that beauty with you. This time it was the characters, and who knows what it'll be next. That's all I got for you folks. I'll see you next time. Droomish out.